Have you ever wondered what your DNA says about your diet and hormones? Well, today's episode, we are going to explore the connection between genetics and popular diets like keto, vegan, and low carb. Additionally, we'll explore how DNA reports can help us better understand our hormones and their impact on our health. My guest today is Kashif Khan, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the DNA Company, where personalized medicine is being pioneered through unique insights into the human genome. He is also the host of the Unpilled podcast. Growing up in Vancouver, Canada, my neighbor, in an immigrant household, Kashif developed an industrious entrepreneurial spirit from a young age. Prior to his tenure at the DNA Company, Kashif advised a number of high-growth startups in a variety of industries. As Kashif dove into the field of functional genomics as the CEO of the DNA Company, it was revealed that his neural wiring was actually genetically designed to be entrepreneurial, which I really want to talk about that. I wonder if I am hardwired for that. However, his genes also revealed a particular sensitivity to pollutants, as did mine. Now, seeing his health from a new lens, Kashif dove further and started to see the genetic pathways that led to his own family's challenges and the opportunities to reverse chronic disease. His measure of success is not in dollars earned, but in lives improved. So, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Awesome to be here.
Yes. So, okay, I gotta tell me your story of your genes
Yeah.
because I'm so keen. Like, I didn't see anywhere in my own. So, everybody, I just did my own DNA. I've been wanting to interview DNA Company. I'm not kidding you, for years and years. And so I finally did it. And I got a hold of them and I said, I want to get the kit myself so that we can go through it a little bit today. And so you guys can see what it's all about. So if you're listening to this, make sure you go over to the YouTube channel and watch the video because we will show a little bit of my genetic report and we'll go through my hormones and extra things like that. But I didn't see anything about my genetically designed to be an entrepreneurial entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I learned a lot about myself. That was a big one for me. And that actually solved um, specific health concerns that I didn't think were rooted in my personality.
Yeah.
Because the same thing that can drive you towards entrepreneurialism can also drive you towards addiction or depression. And what is
Oh.
it is the inability to experience reward and pleasure.
Ah.
So how do you experience reward and pleasure? Dopamine. Dopamine allows you to feel that wow moment, right? It's that satisfaction, but it doesn't only come from pleasure. So we think of dopamine as like a alcohol, tasty food, Netflix chemical, but it's also I achieve something at work chemical, right? So it allows you to feel that satisfaction from reward. And satisfaction is the key because you can get it from either side source, pleasure or reward. So I've been in all three buckets of addiction, depression, and achievement because in different contexts in my life, different things were going on, and I fell into different paths because of this dopamine pathway, right?
Right.
So now all of a sudden, fast forward, I'm highly entrepreneurial because my father passed away. I had to take care of the family. And I all of a sudden, sorry, I don't know if you heard there was an alarm going off. Do you hear that?
No, I can't hear it.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt and uh, I don't know
Do
if
you want
you're
to go
able to.
see what it is?
No, it's somebody else with a job. I don't know what's
Oh,
going on. There's an alarm just going off. It was really loud, so I thought it disrupted the recording.
no.
No, okay. Okay, so sorry, we'll have to edit that. Sorry. So I'll go
Yeah.
back. So if it goes off again, I know it's not a problem, right?
Okay.
Okay. I have no clue what's going on. Okay. Sorry. So now, as an entrepreneur, I'm using this as my superpower as opposed to my kryptonite because it allows me to be the visionary and do things and take risks and be that frontline warrior that other people aren't willing to be. Meanwhile, if I fall back into the world sucks because I can't experience pleasure like other people, I might become depressed. So I now know how to manage that.
Wow.
And just going back to the first thing you said, this was driven not only by this, but a number of health problems. So I had eczema, psoriasis, I had migraines like I know you've had in the
Yes.
past. I
Yeah.
had crazy gut issues, and of course the depression we just talked about. So I learned that there was a couple of key sections of my human instruction manual, my DNA, that was just missing. Like there was pages literally torn out of my DNA. And there were certain jobs I didn't do well, mainly around detoxification. And I was in a building where there was the manufacturing company downstairs putting toxic pollutants into the airways, and I was the only person that got sick.
Mm.
You know, an office full of people, I was the only one with all these inflammatory and autoimmune type conditions, where everyone else is like, we don't know what's wrong with you. You must have a problem, right? And
Yeah.
so this is where I truly learned that our bio individuality, like how we're unique, is so important to longitudinal health.
Yeah. That's funny you would say that because that's what I love about DNA is it's so interesting to see your results and be like, oh my gosh, that's why this happens to me. Because I found out years ago that I was riddled with heavy metals. And so I went on this like massive deep dive as to why do I have all these like off the chart levels of lead and mercury, and I have no mercury filling. So I was like, where's this coming from? And then like the more and more I researched, the more I realized, okay, every one of us has heavy metals. It's just some of us can detox them well and others
Yeah.
can't. And when you look at my DNA report in my detoxification, it actually says you do not do well with heavy metals, pretty much. Like, in other words, it's actually said something about heavy metals and that I am a person that probably does not get rid of that well. I was like,
Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly it. That everything is a threat, but our bodies are armed to deal with threats. Like this is what inflammation is. It's your body fixing things, right? This is what is it's about being able to prioritize what's my red flag? What job does my body not do well? There's thousands of little jobs happening in every little cell. And where am I dysfunctional? It's hard to understand that at the surface level until you have a symptom, which is far too late. So
mhm.
if you know, here's the thing that my body, or maybe multiple things that my body doesn't know, then all of a sudden you know, okay, here's a supplement I need to take. Here's the thing I need to remove from my life. Here's the thing I need to add, right? Here's the way I should be exercising at the gym. Here's the way I should be eating, as opposed to trial and error. You know, this might feel good, this won't feel good, and I don't really know why. So that's kind of how we look at things. Understand
Mhm.
the blueprint, find the red flags, and now you know what choices to make in everything you're doing every day.
And like, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago,
Yeah.
when all the health problems began and you spend years and years and years and you could see the amount of supplements I've bought, the testing. And finally, when I did DNA testing, it was like, why didn't I do this so long ago? Because the amount of money I would have saved
Yeah.
on all of the supplements. And because, yeah, you can see this is where you're not doing well, this is where you're doing okay. And I mean, I had a whole long, like my first couple little pages there, it was like, you're doing great, we have no recommendations on this in this area. And I was like,
Yeah.
awesome. And I do feel well, I do feel like I do those things really well. And then it's like, but
Uh-huh.
you don't do so good over here, so let's work on that. So hormones are a big thing, and I know that the DNA companies started
Yes.
with that in mind. Like, you guys' goal was to really help women figure out their hormone balance and like hormone just issues. And so you have a bit of a story about your niece that talks about this. And why did you guys want to focus on women's hormone health, and where
So
did that kind of end up?
it was the thing that was the most broken in healthcare. So we had like during our research, you know, we worked with a number of clinics on learning how to do exactly what we just said, identify the red flag in the genome, and then know what the right epigenetic habits are, environment, nutrition, lifestyles. We had to actually work with patients. And we did this with thousands of people, by the way. And the thing that kept coming up is that female hormone health really sucks, like bad, you
Thank you.
know?
Thank you for recognizing that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it because there's not enough recognition for it.
And I don't mean that women are bad. I mean that the
Yeah,
healthcare system supporting it is horrible.
horrible.
Truly, this is it. Yeah, it's your hormones. You're supposed to have problems. That's kind of female hormone health.
Yeah,
And let's give this thing a name and then tell you what pill to take. And you're probably going to be on it for 10 years at least.
yeah.
And meanwhile, when we look at things genetically, none of these things need to happen. Like we're dealing right now, for example, with this young lady with endometriosis who's told she has endometriosis, which she does have if you look at it symptomatically. but it's not a thing. What it is estrogen toxicity, which by the way, you have, we're going to talk about.
Mhm.
And that is the actual problem. The problem is how she metabolizes her hormones, what she turns them into, and then what her habits are that are misaligned with that genomic map, which then equals endometriosis, which takes years and years and years and years and years to develop of doing things wrong. If she had done things right, it would have never happened. It's not innate, it's not part of who she is, right?
Right.
This is where we've learned in a big way. So yeah, and my niece is a perfect example of that. So she perfectly healthy, no issues, never had a problem. And all of a sudden, my niece, and my sister live together, called me saying that I think she's having like an anxiety attack. She can't breathe. So I go over there and I call my friend who's a pediatrician, and he said that, yeah, it sounds like a classic anxiety attack. So I said, what do I do? He said, well, just wait it out. And if it happens again, let me know and try and figure out what her problem is. Right. So about a month or so goes by and it does happen again. And this time my mom says she fell over and hurt herself. I think she may have damaged her leg, like broke it possibly. And can you take her to the hospital? So I did. And again, I called my pediatrician friend, Canadian healthcare system. Can you get me in a little quicker? I don't want to
Yeah.
spend 10 hours in emergency. So we did that. And we then heard after 8 hours, if it happens again, let us know. And I realized at that moment, that means if it happens again, she's getting diagnosed with anxiety and she's getting prescribed a pill,
Yeah.
right? That's her identity now. So I should have at that point looked at her DNA, which I already had. But the practical reality is I was a busy guy that didn't do what I was supposed to do and went back to work. My mom called me again. This time she called and said, your niece has run away from home. And to me, this made no sense. I said, no, you're wrong. She must be hiding. So she's like, no, there's a note on the table. She's gone. Completely out of character. Sweet, innocent girl. You would never think this would ever happen. So I get over there. She's standing just down the street, not knowing what to do. And I get her. I said, what is it? Is it bullying? Is it like school? What is happening? And she didn't know. She had no clue. She just needed to get out of that space. And she was kind of running away from the feeling, right?
Right.
So that's when I literally picked up my phone. I opened her report, which I had in my email, and I started to look for the red flags. I didn't look for anxiety, right? I looked for like what biological process is not doing well. And the thing that screamed out was her hormone profile. So the beginning of the cycle is when your hormones are already at their lowest. You just finished getting rid of all of them. And she has a much deeper valley that she goes into. So it's not slim to none, it's like negative something, right?
Oh.
So she doesn't make enough hormones. So that was red flag number one. So then I went back to the text messages and calls from my mom, and I looked at them and I could see, like clockwork, she was calling me monthly. So I asked my mom, what part of her cycle was she in when you called? And she said, oh yeah, you're right. It was right when it was starting,
Yeah.
right? It was right at that point. So we took another step and looked in her genome, and I found that her vitamin D pathway was completely broken. So what does that mean? Your vitamin D pathway is more complex than other pathways because you first have to grab the D2 from the sunlight, convert it into D3. There's a gene that does that, step one. You then need to transport it to the cell where it's actually used. That's the second step, step two. You then need to bind it at the cell, which is step three. She didn't do any of those jobs well. And the reason why vitamin D, unlike all the other micronutrients, has this complex pathway is because you can overdose, and our ancestors were out in the sun all day. So they actually need
Right.
to slow down that overdose of vitamin D where we don't get enough. We're indoors, right?
Right.
So now
Yes.
vitamin D, of the 22,000 genes that make up your genome, 2,000 are dependent on this one thing to express properly and do their job. It's a super important, it actually is a hormone. It's not a vitamin.
Yeah.
I think we call it that because if everybody had enough, there wouldn't be any medication sold, right? So it's
Yeah.
now been rebranded a vitamin. It's actually a hormone. So really, really important for all these biological processes. So hormone down here, vitamin D not working. Then I looked at the context. This happened during peak COVID 2 years ago,
Oh.
right? Where in Toronto, in the winter, where we had the longest lockdown of the whole world, literally in Toronto, she hadn't been outside in like 4 or 5 months
Oh my
and was
gosh.
getting zero vitamin D,
Wow.
right? Hormones down here. The thing that might mitigate and help manage that low hormone problem was the vitamin D, also not working. And on top of that, she wasn't getting any, right? Now, why did it express as a mood and behavior issue? Because like her crazy uncle, she didn't make enough dopamine. Or I shouldn't say make, she didn't bind enough. There's a receptor in your brain called DRD2. The gene profile for most of my family is we don't have the density, so we can't bind the dopamine. So she's already teetering on life sucks.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And she
Yeah.
needs more stimulus. And she's indoors, not talking to friends, not doing anything, and everything was already bad. So this is what actually happened. She didn't have an anxiety problem. And if I didn't know this, she would still be on a pill today.
Yes.
She would be on an anxiety pill. She was also told to take birth control, right?
Oh.
To augment her hormone levels. So imagine, so anyways, by the way, all I did was I gave her high dose vitamin D and I gave her L-theanine to boost her dopamine levels. And she has not had this problem once since then.
Oh my God. That is a fascinating story. Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
crazy?
Like, that's so crazy. And the fact that you could put those puzzle pieces together like that, no
Yeah.
one else could have done that. Like,
And
unless
that's
they were a
where,
geneticist or whatever, right? Like,
yeah, and even you're right that even geneticists don't think this way, right?
right. Oh,
This is functional genomics. This is not genetics.
okay.
Functional genomics is akin to what is medicine? Medicine is we're going to diagnose it and give you a pill. Functional medicine is we're going to find out why it happened. What's the root cause? Like, what did you do wrong? Which is not what you get at a doctor typically, right?
Hmm.
So, same thing with genetics and functional. Genetics is you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. Good luck.
Yeah.
What do I do with that, right?
Yeah.
Versus functional genomics is you don't detox heavy metals well. That could cause neural inflammation, which could lead to cognitive decline. You make estrogens that are toxic. That could lead to inflammation, which could lead to cognitive decline. Why does 80% of what we know Alzheimer's to be occur in women? 80% are in
Because of
women
estrogen.
because of estrogens and estrogen toxicities, either the lack of estrogens
Yeah.
or the potency of toxic estrogens,
Yeah.
right? So this swing. So this is the where you can speak to the why and you can tell stories like this because when you think of things functioning, which is how does the body work? Step one, what are the genes that point to red flags, the jobs my body's not doing well? And then what choices does that inform? What are my epigenetic habits? What should they be? That's a fulsome answer where you can actually action something.
Oh, my mind's just because I'm just thinking of my own where I've got the ApoE4 gene. I got
Right.
a 3 and a 4, I think. And then I've also been told that I had a both, like, is it 4 and 4 that's the worst? What is the worst one?
Yes, 4-4, yeah.
Yeah. So I originally had 3-4, then they switched it at my old DNA report to 4-4, and then this one is back to 3-4. So either way, my grandfather died of it. I've always thought I had it, so that was confirmed. So I've always been like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I replace my estrogen to the day I die because I know how important that is for brain function. But now getting this report, now I'm like, ooh, but I don't do well with the 4-hydroxylation pathway, which is a toxic estrogen
Yeah,
metabolite. And so I didn't put that together. So I'm going to have to really look at this in this very big picture way and go, okay, yes, I have to replace my estrogen, but I also have to support how I'm detoxifying it.
exactly. So you need to, so if you're gonna, and this is where we have so many challenges with women that cause breast cancer unknowingly. So I'm going to add estrogens. Okay, what does your body do with those estrogens? If you convert it into 4 or 16 hydroxyestrogen, which your genes determine, then you're creating a toxic metabolite that fuels breast cancer and ovarian cancer. You don't need to know what version of the BRCA gene you have, right? That's not enough of an answer. BRCA is go cut your breasts off or go
Yeah.
cut your fallopian tubes out. Like that's
Yeah.
what's being told right now
Yeah.
because we see this marker that points to risk. BRCA doesn't cause cancer.
Wow.
BRCA is a tumor suppressor. It fixes cancer.
Oh.
And if you have the bad version, you don't do a good job of fixing it. But if we can determine what causes it in the first place, why are we worried about fixing it? Right? So
Right.
for you, we know the cause is 4-hydroxy. And we know that you may decide to go on an estrogen therapy, which means you're increasing that 4-hydroxy metabolite, right? You're making more of it because you added more estrogen, the ingredient that makes it. So then, yes, we need to support that with detox. Let's boost up those detox pathways that get rid of that stuff for you. Your body already does these jobs. And if I look at your report, you're not doing those jobs so well when it comes to the detox. So there's four pathways we look at, and on three of the four, you're like completely off. It's a big stop sign saying, no, don't get rid of these toxins. Let's just keep them here for a while.
Yeah.
Right. And and on
Right.
one of them you got kind of like a slow, yeah, we'll get to it next week and we'll but you're not really doing it. So that's the trick is, okay, I want these hormones, I want to feel good, I want to stay youthful, but I need to support these detox pathways. And by looking at my biological map, I know where to intervene. I know what part of this cascade is broken. And now I know exactly what to focus on. And these problems won't happen to me.
Mhm. Do you find, because I've always kind of, when I've listened to other people, yourself and Mansoor from DNA Company, he doesn't
Right.
work there anymore, but before he's been on lots of podcasts and I've listened to them, and he talks a lot about, being estrogenic or androgenic. And I've always said, okay, I'm obviously very estrogenic. And I can tell just by my body type what I've dealt. I've had, a history of endometriosis, ovarian cysts, like PMS, all these like very hormonal things have always been in my life. But then as I went through menopause, started to go through menopause and losing my estrogen,
Mhm.
even when it dropped just a little bit, I would have the worst symptoms.
Yeah.
And I like, is there something to that? Like where it's like, I'm super dependent on estrogen because I'm very estrogenic. So yes, it can cause me some problems, but at the same time, I'm going to be more sensitive to losing my estrogen because of that. Rather, a woman that's androgenic, she'll be more sensitive to losing her androgens and probably only needs to replace her estrogen, half the amount that I would, let's say. Like, do you see that?
We see that. We see it's ultimately what we're saying is you want to be in this homeostatic middle ground, like I'm
Yeah.
balanced.
Yeah.
And any imbalance this way or that way is not going to, it's going to make you feel off. The hormone cascade is very sensitive, right? So when you pull it in one direction, like everything gets your cardiovascular health, your brain health, your mood, your bone health, your skin, your hair, everything changes because these hormones direct all these little jobs. So if you've been feeling or having levels, for 45 years, 50 years, and all of a sudden things change,
Mhm.
how are you not going to feel different?
Yeah.
Regardless of where you're starting from. We do see some women that are more, call it estrogen or androgen balanced. They're more in the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah.
And they're the women that everyone is jealous of. Is like,
Yep.
oh, menopause. Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. I had one hot flash. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Screw you. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, they're out there. It's possible, and we can
Yeah.
determine from your genes if that is you. But the other cool thing is if that's not you, we can determine how to get you there, right?
Mhm.
Like, how do you have that flawless menopause? How do you have that lack of hot flashes? We do that all the time when we're working with women. Or if we see, the opposite, where maybe you are designed for a smooth sailing, but your environmental cues are off. There's too many hormone disruptors. There's too much birth control. There's too much hormone therapy. There's too much chemicals, pesticides, your Teflon coated frying pan that you didn't even realize was mimicking hormones. So there's a whole other layer to look at.
Yeah.
So again, it starts with who are you? What's your genetic pathways? Where do we focus? And then we start to look at the choices you need to make.
Yeah. And just because you have the genes doesn't mean you're expressing them either. So you can also look at them and go, oh, I feel like, because even for myself, I know that when I first started to replace estrogen, I immediately was in that estrogen dominant phase because I wasn't detoxing it. I had
Mm.
sore breasts. I gained weight. I was like, ooh. So I actually stopped. I took a step back, went back to my genetic report, said, okay, I need to support these pathways. I did that for a while, put the estrogen back in. Lo and behold, I haven't had a problem since.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We see that all the time. So you're doing things right, right? You're also a little better versed than most on how to navigate a report like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the whole point. It's got to be easy to do also.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it can't be like here's this surgery or here's this pill or here's this therapist you need to see for the next 2 years. We got to find the easiest solution, which when you look at root cause, it's usually about environment, lifestyle, nutrition. They're things you're doing anyway. We're just telling you to do the things that are aligned to you. You're taking supplements, you're already eating foods. And when you talk about expression and you take a Dutch test, for example, which I know you're really good at, right?
Mhm.
The same person can have two completely different results for their Dutch test, depending on if they had a green smoothie or how they exercised, or if they went golfing and breathed in a bunch of chemicals that mimicked
Wow.
hormones, so expression is an important thing to consider. So your DNA will tell you who you are,
Yeah.
and it will tell you what choices to make so that you do express the way you want, is the
Right.
key, right?
So you can manipulate them to have the
Yeah,
best expression. Yes.
yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about that whole, you either are possibly estrogenic, androgenic, or you're sitting in between. And just some of the SNPs, like let's talk about some of them and what they mean and how
sure.
somebody could manipulate some of these things.
And there's even a fourth category, by the way. We've seen people
Oh,
that are co-dominant. They're androgen and estrogen dominant,
oh,
which is a whole other problem to
oh,
deal with.
those poor women.
Chimera type. So we've seen it, but we've seen, for example, an androgen dominant woman with a young lady comes into our clinic. This is during the research phase, 21 years old. She said she had her first menstrual cycle when she was 16 and has had a total of 5
Mm.
by the age of 21, right? Now, she has a perfect six pack that's rock solid. She's chiseled, does not work out a day in her life, but she has acne so bad that she can't sit on a chair without a rubber donut,
Oh my gosh, a poor girl.
right? So that is extreme androgenization. DHT, which is a dihydrotestosterone, it's a very potent form of testosterone. She made a lot of hormones, she made a lot of testosterone, she made a lot of DHT. The cascade keeps going and going, and she did not clear the DHT. So her end net result with this hefty, hefty pool of a very toxic testosterone. Amazing superpowers, like I said, not a drip of fat on her body, but she didn't feel well, right? So
Mhm.
what could have come out of that? PCOS, ovarian cysts, hair loss. So now all of a sudden her set of problems and benefits are very different than the estrogenized woman who maybe makes a lot of hormones again, but converts them very rapidly into estrogen. And all of a sudden it's very hard to lose that fat, right? The figure is a lot curvier. All of a sudden there's crazy menstrual cycles. It's a bit of a more of a roller coaster, right? Especially if there's estrogen toxicity, which is then causing the cramps and the pains, and crazy heavy cycles. And then you get into things like fibromyalgia and endometriosis. So all of these things are, again, rooted in I'm estrogen dominant, I'm estrogen toxic, and my environmental cues are not aligned with who I am genetically. So knowing you are step one. And this hormone cascade, this is the reason we decided to focus here. It didn't exist. So when we
No.
looked at genetic tests, there were genetic tests that tested for various hormone genes, but it wasn't mapped out in the context of how a woman's actually walking around on this earth,
Right.
right? Here's how you actually metabolize from step one all the way to Z. And here's all the different things that can turn those dials. That map didn't exist. We had to build that map. And a really cool thing happened is we started by thinking that there's an infinite number of profiles. How are we possibly going to support every woman? How do we scale this information so that all doctors can learn this? And after going through thousands of women in our research phase, we learned that no, there's actually only like 6 or 7 buckets that all women fit into. And we didn't know we were going to find this. So now
Wow.
it's very easy for someone like you did. You can open the report and read things that are relevant to you, that are highly personalized, because we know which bucket you fit in. So here's all the problems, here's all the solutions. Now go have a good life. You're going to feel good if you go implement this stuff.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating. So let's talk about this, the CYP3A4.
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah.
So we're being selfish here. We're talking about you.
Yeah, that's good because everybody will get an idea though of what they could get from this report.
So that gene takes your estrogen and converts it into 4-hydroxyestrogen, which is what you do at somewhat of a medium fast pace. You're also not going into the healthy bucket, the 2-hydroxy. So that means when you make your hormones, which you do make a little bit of extra estrogen, you're estrogen dominant, and of that heavy pool of estrogen that you're making every month, you're funneling down the wrong pathway, 4-hydroxy. So that could lead to, like, a bit of a PMS problem, menstrual cramps and pains. It could lead to some of these concerns we said, like fibromyalgia, endometriosis, etc. It could also lead to a really rocky menopause because the hormones are heavy and they're also toxic. Why does that matter? Inflammation. Inflammation is the root of every problem we have when it comes to chronic disease and aging and all these things we complain about. So you not only are you having to deal with the external sources of inflammation, the heavy metals in the foods and the pesticides and stress and lack of sleep, you're also making an inflammatory insult every month in your body in a context that our genes haven't yet understood. They think you're still living in the 1600s where it was beautiful sleep and good food and no pollution, and stress was only when you went to battle. Otherwise, you were on a farm living a good life, right? So that's the context that our body thinks we're in. And that's why it's okay to have a somewhat fast CYP3A4, which makes this for it. But now, fast forward to where we actually live in pollution, in stress, the food is toxic, there's plastics on everything, the chemicals you use to clean your house mimic hormones. You took birth control pill for 5 to 10 years and didn't know what a problem that was going to be. So there's all these epigenetic loads that cause an extreme version of your profile, right? The Incredible Hulk comes out of your estrogen toxicity. And that's why there's so much disease that didn't exist. So what's the answer then? We got to go back to our ancestral habits. If you do have this profile like you do, you got to not, there's two dials to turn. Get rid of the toxic insults. Don't expose yourself to the stuff that your body isn't designed to cope with. At the same time, understand the practical reality that's difficult. So let's tune up the capacity to detox this stuff, which you're already doing. Red flag, get rid of the problems, adjust and up-regulate the expression by taking the right detox supplements to help you get rid of that toxic load every month. That's when you can be feeling great, having a good menopause, no problems, great menstrual cycle if you still have one. You can truly choose how you feel.
Yeah, and you can be so specific. And when we look at something like a Dutch test, we see the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 2 is methylation. And I actually do pretty good with a lot of my methylation pathways. So a lot of people, without knowing what their genetics are or never having done a Dutch test, they'll just go out willy-nilly and buy themselves like, oh, I hear I have to detox my liver for the health of my hormones. And they may end up purchasing a bunch of supplements that upregulate that phase 1, yet they're bad methylators. And so then they're releasing all of these toxins into the system, not being able then to get rid of it because it was the methylation that was the issue, or vice versa. And that's a problem.
This is where you have to understand that there's no independent singular jobs in your body. They're all systems and cascades. This is again the difference between genetics and functional genomics. Genetics is you don't methylate well, go take the supplement. Functional genomics is that's only one part of the puzzle. Methylation is like opening the door to throw out the garbage. Last step, right? Who's picking up all the trash and putting it in the bag? Who's bringing the bag to the door? What matter? Does it matter if the door's open if the bag's sitting like 30 yards away? Like you have to first do those jobs, right? And you have to understand the full cascade, not job by job and siloed independent, thinking. It's not how the body works. So exactly to your point, what part of the cascade is broken, this like baton pass from job to job, and if I intervene there and support that, everything gets better, both upstream and downstream. So and that's really where functional genomics answered this question of, okay, I understand my genes, but I can't really action it. Yeah, because you were only looking at one single thing at a time. It's not the way the body works.
And going back to what you're saying, like, as hunter-gatherers, we had all of these things in place for purpose, and now it doesn't match up with our current environment. I always believe like our bodies are super intelligent. Nothing's by mistake. Like we have all of these pathways for a reason.
Yeah.
And we know, okay, so everybody listening, we've got these three first pathways that your estrogen, your three buckets that estrogen can go down and be metabolized through. There's 2-hydroxylation, 4-hydroxylation, and 16-hydroxylation. 4 is the one that has been linked to an increased risk of breast cancer that we're talking about here with that estrogen toxicity. It's like known as like the bad pathway. You don't want it, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. 2-hydroxylation is the safe pathway, and we want to favor that pathway. And then 16-hydroxylation used to be considered a super bad. Now there's evidence showing that actually in postmenopausal women, we want some 16-hydroxylation because it's really good for bone proliferation. So I want to ask you, do you know of why we have 4-hydroxylation? There's got to be some there's got to be some good to it too, right? Like we want to kind of balance between these three. We want to favor that too, but we're still pushing some down the 4. Why?
Yeah.
Do you know?
So some level of inflammation is not bad, right? So keep in mind that your body doesn't know what context you're in. Or I should say our genes. Our DNA is 200,000 years old.
Mhm.
And this is what we fail to recognize in terms of what our habits are supposed to be. Now, think about our current industrial reality. How old is that? A couple hundred years at the most, right? Think about our current chemical laden and toxic food reality. That started in the 1970s. So that's like 50 years old. So you're taking 200 to 250,000 years, that's the approximate age of our DNA. That meant that much exposure of habits and what our body still thinks we're being exposed to. Fast forwarding to this ultra rapid exponential change in our exposures in the last 50 years for food and chemicals, in the last 150, 200 years for industrialization, we are not designed for this context. So, but all of our questions that we ask are in this context because we don't think about what we were designed for. So when we
Yeah.
think about the CYP3A1 or CYP3A4, sorry, and 4-hydroxyestrogen, some inflammation is actually good if all you do is live on a farm and just work and your body's never getting triggered. Like hormetic stress, there's some level of stress that's healthy that
Mhm.
actually supports your body and your mitochondria and your slowing down of aging, and you need some level of stress. And if you have zero, you're going to become a potato that doesn't do anything, right?
Mhm.
You have to
Yeah.
have some activity in the body. And so there may be something to be said about there was a level of inflammatory drip, but in a context where there was no other epigenetic load. There was no chemicals to breathe, there was no garbage food, there was no toxic. So the level was a healthy level, not a toxic level, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the way I think about all of these pathways, the anomalies that don't make sense.
Mhm.
We're thinking about it in the wrong context. Our
Mhm.
bodies haven't evolved and changed into where we currently, and we're not going to catch up. You know, it's going to take millions of years. So
Mhm.
if we wait for that, we'll all be dead. We
Yep.
have to manage things and not just wait for the X-Men to turn up. You know, we're not designed for this reality, and that's why you see these strange things that don't fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read a lot of stuff too, like about the environment and how it's creating this epidemic of polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Yeah.
And they think it's from all the hormone mimicking compounds that are in our environment that are then getting, you know, passed down to the fetus, and these women are being born with these, you know, it's our leading cause of infertility right now. And so we're just we're not built for this toxicity.
For
So
sure.
we have to start. Detox has to be part of this, but it has to be done right, or else you can really mess yourself up. That 4-hydroxylation pathway too, there's a second step to that can also assist, right? Is that called the GST?
Yeah, so the glutathione pathway
Mm-hmm.
is driven by, well, we look at, there's other genes, but the ones that we think are important are GSTT1, TP1, and TM1. And these are the genes that direct the utilization of glutathione in your body to then, like, think of it as these traffic cops in your blood looking for toxins to collect and send to the liver. So a lot of us aren't doing those jobs so well. And there's a really unique type of variation called a copy number variation. So when we think of genetics, we usually think of a mutation or a variant or what we call a SNP, which is a spelling mistake. So I have a gene, but in this location of the thousands of letters that make up the gene, there's a T instead of a C. So now this gene doesn't function properly. That's called a SNP. But there's much more complex variations in that. There's something called a copy number variation. This is something that we uniquely test for that most genetic companies don't because they're looking again for these SNPs, these big data dumps. Copy number variation means how many copies of the gene did I get? Forget about the SNPs in it. Do I even have the gene? Or do I have an extra copy of it? And GSTT1 is one of the few genes in your body where this is possible. Most genes, this isn't possible. It's possible to not even have the gene. Now you're walking around with this key detox job completely missing from your body, right?
Wow.
GSTM1 is your primary detox gene of your gut. So when it comes to everything you're eating and the chemicals and plastics and food colorings, etc., that are coming along with it, you think that your gut tract is able to get rid of those things and support you. When we looked at the data of people that are sick in our research phase, 49% of them did not have this gene, completely missing, which means their gut was completely exposed to any toxin that enters and allowed it to get into the bloodstream. 46% of those people only had one copy, so they were minus 50% capacity. Yeah, so when we look at people that are unhealthy, only 5% of them can actually detox properly at the gut, which makes sense, the connection between gut health and everything else, right? So
Yes.
very important to understand there's variants beyond, and this GST family of genes are really important.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to pull up my records just quickly and just in
Sure.
case there's anything that we want to jump in on and talk about. I do really well actually as far as not there's markers for like cystic acne, hair loss, hirsutism, I can never say that,
Yeah.
hirsutism, but I don't do well with estrogen toxicity and cellulite. Yes, I can vouch for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's very interesting little snips here. We were talking before we jumped on just about my androgens because I
Yeah.
kind of have these two different things. One saying that I don't clear it. Is that right?
Yeah. So at the bottom there's slow SRD 5A2. So you don't make much GHT, right? Which is good and bad. Good in terms of, that's why there's no acne and no hair loss, and no giant bush of hair on your back, right?
Yeah.
That's the DHT.
Yeah.
So, but if you look right below it, it says 0 copies of UGT 2B17. That's again a copy number variation. So that's the key gene pathway that gets rid of the DHT. So we're not saying you make 0, we're just saying you make very little. So now if you were to play around with your hormones and for some reason get more androgenized and have more testosterone, you'd probably cross this line of enough DHT to start causing you problems because you don't clear it at all. So you don't
Wow.
make it very efficiently, but you also don't clear the very little that you make. So you don't want that number to go up.
And on a Dutch test, I know that when I'm looking at their androgens, specifically testosterone, and it has really low levels, I always ask them to also get blood work done because of the UGT enzyme. Because
Right.
if they have the 0 copies, that means that they're not going to pee out the metabolites of their
Yes.
testosterone.
Yeah. So this is where the personalized insight that you have. So the one size fits all doesn't even work when understanding blood work, right?
Yeah.
When you have this level of insight, low testosterone for this profile doesn't mean low testosterone because you don't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So it's a
Oh,
very nuanced insight, but it makes all the difference when you're doing that detective work of trying to fix something. You just can't figure it out and you're stuck. This could be that one thing that you're stuck on.
yeah. Is there things that can help with that or no? Just because you don't have it? Like if you have 0 copies, you have 0 copies. There's nothing we can do or?
Well, if you have 0 copies, then we can't support the gene, but we know of supplements that can clear androgenization and DHT. And, we have on our website like formulas that we've created for estrogen dominance and androgen dominance and detox support and methylation support. We spent part of the research we spent many years studying the genes, but we also understood what ingredients would up and down regulate gene pathways.
You're right.
So
Yeah.
we created these cocktails that people may need for support. Some do, some don't. And we've understood what ingredients actually affect these specific problems.
Wow. Would the line of like saw palmetto and
Exactly,
zinc and
yes.
nettles that would help?
Saw
Yeah.
palmetto, zinc, fenugreek,
Yeah.
you know, these are things that you use on the androgen pathway. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
this is
that's
another the secondary backup, the one that you
this
just
one.
crossed.
Yes. Okay.
That's another DHT clearer, and you're also slow there. So
I've got
the
both.
silver lining gene isn't working for you either. So it's just DHT builds up for you very easy. So again, your testosterone level, the standard marker isn't appropriate for you. A much lower number means a lot more for you.
Right. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. And then we look at 9p21, where you have an innate superpower. Now you're in the top 5% of the population. What's going on is your endothelium, the inner lining of your blood vessel, which
Yeah.
is where inflammation happens, which is where cardiovascular disease starts. You have like this stainless steel, robust, hard to get damaged endothelial lining, which means the likelihood of cardiovascular disease, cholesterolemia, which by the way is a much bigger problem for women than it is for men because of the estrogen toxicity.
Yes.
This is kind of thinking functionally. When we see the 4-hydroxy, this is where we would go. Okay, let's look at her cardiovascular health because she may drive problems there, but you're doing really well. So you have this really resilient lining that's hard to get damaged. So, but what I would do is support with nitric oxide supplements. So you see your NOS3 is a little off. The GT means you have 1 copy of the good version, 1 copy of the bad version. So your body doesn't utilize nitric oxide so efficiently, which is so important for longitudinal cardiovascular health and basically every other job in your body nitric oxide supports.
Yeah.
So you should likely be taking a daily nitric oxide supplement.
And that's really good for even blood flow to the genitals. I've heard it.
Oh yeah,
I've
yeah,
interviewed people like sexperts that were saying, as you age, replace the nitric oxide because it can help bring blood flow. It's what, isn't it kind of what Viagra type thing does?
it's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
But if you supplement with it daily, then you innately build up the ability for your body to utilize it properly, right? So, by the way, I started taking nitric oxide supplements about 6 months ago because I'm very similar to you in my pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't find the right supplement prior to this. And then I found a really great product. It's called no2u.com is a website. Um, and I started waking up with a very unique phenomenon, which told me that it was working.
I have heard this though. I have
Yeah.
heard this.
And it
Yes.
like I didn't
Works very
even
well
that
for
wasn't
that.
even yeah, that wasn't even the point. It just I was just doing it for like long-term health because my dad had cardiovascular issues. And I was like, okay, this is
And
new. Not new, it's just unfamiliar. It's been a while.
yes, and it's a health marker for men. Like men,
Yes,
they say that's something you have to pay attention to. If you're not waking up with a heart on, there could be an issue here, whether it's your
yeah,
testosterone might be low or your nitric oxide. Now, so
yes.
did you take the precursor to it? Citrulline, I think it's called.
No, so
No,
this
okay.
particular product is really cool. It's a beet extract, which so typically when you buy nitric oxide supplements, a lot of them, the nitric oxide actually releases before you even get it in your mouth. They're not formulated very well. There's 2 products I found work. There's something called Cardio Miracle, which is more of like a full spectrum supplement, but it targets nitric oxide. And then there's this one called NO2U, I think it's called, which really I think is the best one I found so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna check
Works
it
really
out.
well. Yeah, really cool product. It's not easy to find. I think you have to buy it from their website, but
So
it's a
this
great
could maybe be a supplement that's going to be on your in your shop soon, or that you guys will
yeah, so we
produce.
are working on our marketplace,
Yeah.
which is all of the things that we know are genetically driven and needed by our patients. So that's coming fairly soon. And yeah, we are going to be curating like all the things that we really believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to check that out. Now that I know that this is something that could be good. So the next one, the GST, we've talked about that, but you can see here, it says my body does not respond well to toxins,
Yeah.
such as oxidants. So I know that I have to take antioxidants, and I
You
know
have to, yeah.
it makes
And
me feel so good when I do.
here's the unique nuance. When you have toxins in your body and you go to, say, a naturopath, they will typically say, okay, you have toxins, glutathione binds toxins, let me give you some glutathione. Seems logical, right?
Yeah.
So now you're a GSTT1 gene, you're missing one copy. So if I give you glutathione, you don't have the instruction to tell it what to do,
Oh
which
my
means not
gosh.
only is it going to bind onto toxins, it's also going to bind onto minerals and nutrients that you actually need. And I can't tell you how many times a naturopath will send us something. I can't figure this person out. They have no energy. They can't get out of bed. There's something wrong with them. Can you please fix them? And we realize it's the glutathione that they keep giving them, that they don't have the GSTT1 gene to instruct. And so they feel horrible because they're not getting any nutrition into their cells either. So for you, you need to work with precursors. NAC,
Oh,
selenium,
thank
alpha
you.
lipoic acid,
Yes.
those things just get to work,
Oh my
right?
gosh, this is something I had to figure out the hard way. When I started doing my heavy metal detox, everyone's like, take glutathione, take liposomal
Yeah,
glutathione everywhere you look. So I go buy myself some liposomal glutathione, start taking it. It made me feel like garbage. I
yeah,
was like, I can't take this. I feel absolutely awful. So then I switched over when I was doing my estrogen experience with replacing it, and I was reacted to it. I was like, I'm going to put in some N-acetylcysteine.
yeah,
That's what did it for me. I did amazingly well as soon as I put the NAC in. It's something I still take to this day because it makes me feel so good. That and curcumin, which is one of the highest antioxidants.
yeah.
Those are my things. And now I see why. I
There you
didn't know
go. So
that.
that's all we're saying. So this is the perfect example of the very first thing we said, which is if you can look at your genes functionally, all we're saying is here's the red flag, your red flag. You're missing one copy of GCT1. Now, what problem are you trying to solve? I have heavy metals. Let's go back to the genome to see which red flag is relevant to that problem. And now you know what choices to make. The
Wow.
choices of what supplements do I take? What environmental cues do I need to remove from my exposure? So that's how you can use this tool ongoing. And the amazing thing is your DNA doesn't change. You're born with it and it's
Right.
permanent. So it doesn't matter what problem you're ever trying to solve at any part of your life, you keep going back to it to ask questions and solve that problem.
Wow. Okay, let's look at now diet, because now diet comes into all of this, right? We've got the
Yep.
hormones, but these are all it's all part of the big picture.
Yeah,
Where do
so I
I,
have
oh,
I
reports.
can
There we go.
open it up.
And this was so spot on too. It was like, even with my fitness, with my diet, it once again took me so long to figure this all out on my own. And it's like I have what is it called? That what the amylase, I don't do great with starches, with carbs,
All
and that
right.
I'm prone to weight gain if I eat too many of them. And I got to prioritize protein. And I have to prioritize whatever snips I had for fitness. It was like, you don't do great with cardio, which I don't. I always thought like, oh, I just wish I could be a runner, and I hate
Yeah.
running, but I love bodybuilding and I love to lift weights, and my genes tell me that's exactly what I should be doing.
Yeah. So that's where, diet is one of the first things people want to typically fix because I'm going to eat anyway. I might as well eat what I'm supposed to eat, right?
Yeah.
And that's usually one of the first questions I get asked. So the way you metabolize fats isn't so efficient, or sorry, is reduced fat
It was
diet.
saturated fats I didn't do great with.
Didn't do great. Okay.
Yeah, we recommend that you reduce your consumption of saturated fats,
Right.
such as butter,
And
ghee,
then,
cheese.
and also your carbs are off, so you don't metabolize starches so well, right? So now the choices you have to make, you would never combine your starches with your fats because your body always will rely on the starches first. It's a much easier fuel to burn. Then it will go to fats. So if you're not doing well with both of them and you're struggling with the carbs, you don't get to the fats efficiently, right? And that's where there's weight gain occurs and insulin resistance, and you start to put yourself in this path of diabetes, which you'd want to avoid. So we can be specific on how to plate your food. Like, what does a plate look like for you? Right.
Yeah.
Then there's insulin response, which may be just below this. So the reason it's saying proteins is because a lot of times when you cook proteins, they get charred and blackened. It's just the nature of cooking them. And remember, your detox profile isn't the best. And
Right.
those that charred, the blackening of the foods is highly carcinogenic. So for you, that's a bigger problem, bigger concern to pay attention to. And that's why it points this out here. And then we look at your vitamin D profile. It kind of looks like my niece's. It's a little better, but it's still not the best. So that first gene, CYP2R1, you do not do a good job of taking vitamin D from the sun and putting it into the blood. So
Mm-hmm.
this first step is levels are going to be low. Second step is you don't transport it so efficiently and you don't bind it so efficiently. Third step. So the answer for you, just like my niece, isn't just, hey, go take some vitamin D. It's also you need to split the dose and take it twice
Yeah.
a day,
That was
right?
fascinating to me. I was like, oh, I had no idea. And that's so good to know. Like, my body can't process a high dose at one time
Yeah.
because of my SNPs. So I have to split it. That's
You have to
crazy.
split it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you probably have ancestry that spent a lot of time in the sun, which
Right.
meant they were used to getting a constant ongoing dose that they had to figure out how to slow down. And that's what the genes are now doing,
Wow.
right?
How do these then tell us, like, oh, you do really well with a ketogenic diet. You maybe be better with a vegan diet, carnivore.
Yeah. So the report speaks to um, the gene findings, right? Now, how do you translate that into, call it like a plan? So
Hmm.
there's a couple things. Did you look at the gene cast, the audio files?
Yep.
Yeah. So the gene cast is like our artificial intelligence reading your report to you,
Yes.
and it's telling you about it. And in there, it's going to tell you a little bit more about what to do. The second thing we're rolling out, actually, funny that we're talking to you now, you'll be the first to share this news.
Oh,
We're rolling out a report review series for people to come to live Q&A sessions with our experts and PhDs and doctors and everything, where they can come with their questions and say, hey, I had this profile, how should I be eating? Or my mom had breast cancer, I don't want it, what should I be looking at in my report? So there's this live session broken up into 4 segments: brain, hormones, diet, sleep, and then I think there's some stuff around immunity and cardiovascular health and stuff. So we were adding that as a sort of no cost or anything. It's just
yeah.
an additional thing we want to do for everybody so that you can get more value. And then from there, some people may say, well, I don't have time for this. I'm busy, or I just need the answer. So we have functional genomics practitioners that can work with somebody hands-on. Some people will spend like a month, like, hey, I just can't lose these last 10 pounds, figure it out for me.
Yeah.
And some people will spend 4, 5, 6 months saying, I want to optimize everything, fix this, but also fix the 3 things that I didn't even know were broken. Go fix everything. So that those are kind of the options.
Yeah. And you guys have but definitely very, very comprehensive. Like, you can, with each of your reports, they're all categorized. You can listen to what he was just saying, your own personal gene cast. So you can go through each of the steps and they'll tell you in like a podcast format, like an audio format, this is what this means. And this is what you have. These are the copies that you have. That's what, and XYZ, this is what it means. So and then you also get like a brief overview. Then you go into each one specifically with written detail, as well as recommendations of each of them, which so it's super comprehensive. Um, yeah, I just think it's like, I still haven't finished going through it. It's literally because I want to like, absorb every little bit. So I'm doing every one. I'm doing the gene cast. I'm going through the system summary. I'm going through each one of them
Yeah.
separately. And so I haven't actually finished it because I just got this on Friday. And so
Oh,
I
cool.
spent like an hour and a half Saturday going through it. And then I'm still haven't quite finished. So I'm going to have to still continue to go through it. But
So
yeah.
here's a curveball for you.
Okay.
By the time you get finished going through it, we're gonna update it with more information and throw you down another rabbit hole. So that's
Oh,
another thing. Yeah, because your genes don't change, so we know who you are, but the
right.
science keeps improving and evolving.
Yeah.
So we keep updating the report. So if you log in another 6 months or so, you may learn something that you didn't learn this week.
Oh, because so you'll add to it.
We keep adding, yeah.
Oh,
For
wow.
example, we added a longevity report that didn't exist a little while ago, right? So that was just a whole other thing that we were able to create. So we're going to keep adding and making it better.
Wow, that's great. And yeah, and then you guys also offer, like you said, like you can meet with somebody to go through it and help you come up with a plan
If needed, yeah,
if
our
needed.
goal is to make it easy. Like
Hmm.
this thing should be easy to use. You should be able to self-serve document. But if somebody has like a clinical issue, I guess in short, what I should say is we know a lot more than what's in the report, but there's
Hmm.
some things we're not allowed to say unless there's a clinician in between, right? So this is regulatory wise, Health Canada, FDA, we can't straight out say, here's breast cancer risk. We literally can't even use those words, just
Wow.
regulatory. So there's things that we know and there's problems that people are trying to solve. Like I've had fibromyalgia for 10 years and I just can't get rid of it. That requires somebody supporting you.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't even touch in on the mood and behavior stuff, but we're going to be out of time here. But even that, what what could that can tell somebody and the relief I feel like that could give someone. I just did a whole podcast on like sugar addiction and
Yeah,
and it's your genes, like you have like the dopamine issue where maybe you don't have great response to your dopamine, maybe you don't have good levels of it. That could drive your food addiction. So I know I
exactly.
always talk about like, oh, get to the root cause of the sugar addiction, go back to your childhood, figure out your trauma. It may just be your genes, like, and
Yep.
then you know what to work with.
We know when it comes to any problem we're dealing with somebody on the coaching level where we're supporting them clinically, we always start by looking at their mood and behavior profile first, their brain first. Because by understanding that, we now know how they think, and they also now know how they think. So, for example, for you, your serotonin is completely dysregulated. So, what does that mean?
Mhm.
Clinically, people would say propensity towards anxiety and depression and mood dysregulation. Serotonin is this mood happy chemical that manages your mood so that it's appropriate for whatever is going on, both good and bad. So your serotonin receptors are a little shorter. So it's hard for you to manage your mood and be as appropriate for whatever is going on. Now, that's the clinical answer. We believe there's more to it than that. The actual mechanism of why this happens is because serotonin is your brain constantly trying to prioritize stimulus. Every sound, every smell, can you please stop chewing your food? That's gross. Can you please stop ticking your pen? I can't focus. Can you please get the dog out of this room? I'm doing a podcast, right? So that's you. That's your brain, which is your brain has less ability to prioritize and focus.
Yes.
So outwardly, people might say, "Oh, she has ADHD."
Right.
But what looks like ADHD is actually the opposite. It's not attention deficit, it's hyperattention. You're just giving everything attention.
Yeah, which is I
Notice
totally
everything,
do it. Yep.
right? So now, in the context of I'm trying to work with people, it's like people might see this, but in the context of you doing your work, you're seeing the world at a much higher level of detail than the average person. So you're also going to outperform when it comes to the things that you want to do well, like crossing every T, dotting every I, remembering exactly what was said. You said you were going to show up at 8:30 and do blah, 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 blah. Right. And they're like, yeah, I got it done. Yeah, but you said 8:30. Right. And so
Yep.
every little detail matters, which allows you to super like thrive in whatever you're doing in your work. So again, this thing is very contextual, which is true of all mood and behavior attributes. There's a context where this thing is a gift,
Yeah.
where I see every little detail I thrive. There's a context where it's a crutch, where I try and work on a team and everybody frustrates me and it gets me upset because they don't see the level of detail I see, right?
Yeah.
So all the thing that I call anxiety and the thing that I call irritability is also I'm a great analyst and I could be an amazing lawyer or a financial guru because I just see everything. So context is key when it comes to mood and behavior, and we always start there.
Which is really good, I think, because yeah, you can read that and you're like, oh, what? I'm prone to depression? Oh no.
Yeah.
Like, but then it's what makes me a great business owner, I think, because
Yes.
I make sure that I do the best that I possibly can all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. And it's so
Yeah.
funny because the recommendations for that, I laughed because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I've had to implement, just figuring myself out over the years. It's like, whatever you do, like, do not have your phone on if you're trying to get something done. Do not do this, do not do that. And I'm like, I do all those things because I know myself. It's like, oh, what's this? Let's go over here and pay attention to this now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it helps me manage myself. All of these things. Okay. Oh, I could just keep talking to you. So thank you very much for coming on the show. I want you to go through my DNA report for me, but you're so good at it. Uh
Yeah,
we
we'll do
have
that. We'll figure you out from the inside. We'll
okay,
figure it out
good. Yeah.
from the
What do we have a discount for the listeners? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget what it is. I didn't even write it down. 15%?
Yes, 15%. Yeah.
15%. I don't even know what the
Yeah, use
coupon
the
code
code.
is.
Don't go buy retail. There's a code here for you.
Okay. I'll put the code in the show notes because I forgot to even look at what that was.
Me too.
It was like, because I got the email for that probably 2 months ago when I first contacted you.
Right.
And then I wanted to do the DNA report. So we had to make it so that I didn't talk to you for a couple months. So,
Yeah.
anyways, folks, I'll get on that. It'll be in the show notes. And any questions, just let me know. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. I finally got you on.
Oh, it was a pleasure. This is awesome. You're doing amazing work for people, and people need more of it. So thank you.